Hello, this is Kelly Gatewood, and this is my Module 9, my case study of when ethics and policies collide for class EDL 855. I'm going to start off by summarizing the case for you. In this case, we have David Ramos, who is an honors class student and a standout trombonist. He was caught with brass knuckles in the hallway. We have James, who is a muscular and heavily tattooed student known to be in trouble, and he admitted to giving James the brass knuckles. We have Richard Inman, who is a first-year assistant principal, and he is the one dealing with the situation. And does he need to follow the policy or use his judgment on how to handle the situation? The school policy requires that both boys go to the district DAPE, which is where they go when they get expelled or suspended. And if the principal suspends both of them, or if he does not suspend David, then he will get an official reprimand for not following the policy. We were asked to talk about the legal and ethical issues, and so here are some of the issues that I saw with it. That the school has a zero tolerance policy, and the principal does not want to follow it. David is a first-time offender, and he has the same consequences as James, who is a repeat offender. This will cause permanent records on the student or the administrator, depending on how the situation is held. Both students were charged with felony possession of a prohibited weapon on school property. So we know that law enforcement is choosing to follow their policy. So you have to decide, does Richard follow his policy or the school policy like law enforcement is, or is he going to use his own judgment? Okay. One sentence summary of what happened. An assistant principal must decide on expelling a student that was intimidated into possessing a prohibited weapon on school property. Here are the facts. The people, I've already talked about most of them, is you have Richard Inman, who is the first-year assistant principal. We have James, which is a 15-year-old undisputed leader of a group, which basically they say maybe not the best group. We talked about that he is very muscular. We have James's fifth period teacher. We didn't talk a whole lot about them, but they're the ones that saw the incident happen and that reported it to the principal. You have David Ramos, who is a slightly built young scholar. And they said, he's an honor student, and obviously they're talking about the fact that he's smaller than James. We have the law enforcement officer that was involved that took both of the boys away to the juvenile detention center. We have the mothers. We have James's mother, who, when she was contacted, didn't really say anything except for tell him to keep him there for a couple days and maybe he'll learn his lesson this time. And then you have David's mother, who came to the office angry and didn't understand the situation and was all about trying to help her son. And then we also had the director of secondary education, which would basically be Richard's supervisor. This took place at Rocket Junior High, and it talks about that the south side of town kids attend there, and that there are approximately 900 students in this building. So to me, this seems like a very large school, and so this kind of put me in a different situation of how I'd handle stuff than in our little small rural school. The programs that are involved is, I assume that it's a public school. It doesn't really come right out and say that. But just from everything, kind of reading between the lines. And then it also talks about the DAPE program, which was the district's disciplinary alternative education program. And in the summary, they called it a hellhole. And that's why the principal didn't want to send David there. But it kind of bothered me a little bit that he didn't really have any problem sending James there, but it was not okay for David. So that was kind of something that stuck out to me that I was kind of shocked by. So here's the information that we have. No matter what happens, there's going to be consequences. Either Richard has to decide if it's him or David who is going to have the marks on their records. Once again, James is going to get his consequences. Both are just now starting out their careers, and this could cause long-term consequences for either one of them, depending on which one he does. The stakeholders that are going to be affected, because they know that Richard either follows the policy as expected or bends the rules depending on the situation. So his bosses, the principal, the superintendent, this director of whatever, secondary education, the principal and the students are the ones that actually have the most at stake in the outcome, because they are the ones affected by the decision made. Either the principal or the student are getting something on their record because of this incident. Some of the more information that I need to know. Has David really ever been in trouble before and the principal just didn't know about it? Is this truly his first offense? Should the officer have been involved so soon? Did we really need to call him into the office? What's the policy on that? Why did we have the officer bring the kids to your classroom or to the office? Once again, these are kind of things that I struggle with going into such a small school. We don't have an officer, student resource officer, so I don't know at what point you're supposed to be bringing the involvement in. I mean, for law enforcement to come into our building, it's a pretty major thing. Was there metal detectors on the building? That should have alerted the brass knuckles that were being brought into the building. How did they get into the school? What's the policy on all of that? There's just some things that I felt like I needed to know a little bit more information on how I would handle this situation and how have other people handled this situation. This would be something completely new in our school. This would be a major thing, and maybe in this big school that has the South Side and all of that kind of stuff, this isn't as major. And you could talk to somebody else on how they would have handled it. Okay, so here's my options. My first option is that I expel David and follow the policy. The consequence of that is I did my job. The policy is followed, but if I'm Richard, I'm going to struggle with those decisions. Obviously, it bothers me that David's going down for being bullied into taking these brass knuckles. My second option is I'm Richard and I'm going to take the write-up. I'm not going to punish David. David's school career is not impacted, but my professional career may be. And that's just going to be a decision that I defend later. If that's the route that I go, I'm going to have to own it and say this is why I did it and understand that that's what's my consequence for it. I could talk to the director of secondary education supervisor again. Maybe if I go into it with some more points and explain my side, he might be willing not to write me up. Maybe we can come up with a solution. I don't know. My other option is maybe I discuss it with somebody else, a confidant, somebody else that's been in the situation. Maybe I need to take it to a lawyer. I mean, to me, this seems like a kind of extreme option, but it is an option I have if I don't want it to be on my record the rest of my life. Okay. So here's the options. I kind of started talking about them before. So the first one is where David gets expelled. Okay. David's paying the consequences for his actions. Yes, he was pressured into carrying him, but he knew it was wrong. Why should he be able to get off scot-free? You're not supposed to have brass knuckles at school. And just because he hasn't been in trouble before, why? I mean, this does seem a little extreme for his first offense. But nobody, once again, like I said earlier, nobody's having problems with James going down for this. And maybe this is his first serious offense. Maybe it's only been fighting up to this point. It doesn't tell us exactly what's happened to James. The second option, Richard just has to pay the consequences for having the law enforcement in the room so soon to begin with. I don't think that he thought this was going to turn out like it did. This may just have to be a learning lesson for Richard also, that policies are there to be followed, and when he didn't follow them, if he doesn't follow them, then he has to understand that and know that going forward, maybe he doesn't call the law enforcement officer to bring the students to his office. The next one would be talk to the supervisor. He's already talked to him once before, but maybe talking to him again with more points and maybe some options of a compromise may work. And then maybe that's the best way to handle the situation. The last one, this is kind of what I felt was extreme, where you go talk to somebody else or even maybe a lawyer. But they may be able to give him good advice. Maybe making a mountain out of a molehill, but you may not. Maybe this is something that Richard needs to understand how to handle better to make sure he doesn't get himself in this position again. So here's my plan. I feel like that David has already been back in the classroom for a week. And for us to expel David or make him go to that DAPE, it's too late. This is going to have to be a learning lesson for Richard. If he was going to expel David and follow the policy, he should have done it from the very beginning. When he didn't do it from the very beginning, then now he's going to have to be the one that owns it. I do think that he needs to talk to everybody that's involved with it. He needs to talk to a supervisor and explain to him why he's making this decision that he is. He needs to talk to David and basically explain that you're kind of getting away lucky this time. I'm going to take the consequences for technically your actions because I haven't followed through, because I've let you back in class. I feel like if he hasn't been back in class for a week, then yes, maybe you could follow policy. But policy should have been done way before now if you were going to be the one to follow it. I think the best spin he could do on this is make it a relationship building tool. Build that relationship with David and show that, I've got faith in you. I'm doing this so you don't have this record following you the rest of your life. And I think also talk to James and go and talk to him and say, okay, this is what happened. How are we going to get you back in school? We need you here. You've been being a good leader. How can we turn this around for the positive? Richard kind of made up his mind right away that it wasn't the right thing for him to have done this to David. And he just needs to own that was a decision he made. And even though we're here a week later and he's going to get punished for it, that's how it's going to be. Maybe going forward, he helps change the policy or he does something, but now he knows what's going to happen when he doesn't follow policy. And he's going to have to know that he has consequences for his actions too, as the assistant principal. I don't know. This has been very interesting for me just because we don't deal with this kind of stuff at our school. And, the supervisor coming in, that was kind of shocking to me because our principal is a supervisor. Her decision sticks. So, yeah, I just think that it's too late. And Richard's the one that's going to have to take the fall for this, for not following through and letting David back in class already. So, thank you very much.